Communism destroys democracy. Democracy also destroys communism. And thinking this, millions of Chinese college students with professors, scientists, and other intellectuals started protesting that we also will overthrow the communist government of China. But this protest could not bring democracy to China, but added another dark chapter to the Black Book of Communism. And this is the dark chapter that we know as the 1989 Tiananmen Square massacre, in which thousands of unarmed and innocent students were gunned down and crushed by tanks. The Chinese Communist government still does not want to bring this blood-stained history to the whole world, because it is enough to expose the Communist government of China. So with this episode, we understand this properly. We know it from a communist leader named Mao Zedong established the People's Republic of China on October 1st, 1949. From this day, the Communist Revolution had also started inside China. So thus, gradually after coming into power, the Communists crushed all the political opponents and also a great priority on industry building. In 1953, he formed a cooperative which proved very valuable, but the upcoming years were not easy. During the land reform, a significant number of landlords and well-to-do farmers were beaten to death at mass gatherings organized by the Communist Party, as the land was taken from them and given to poorer farmers, which significantly decreased financial inequality. In January 1959, Mao Zedong launched the Great Leap Forward, trying to boost agriculture and industrial production. The program founded large agricultural communities with as many as 75,000 individuals working the fields. He also projected the collectivization of lands where private property was abolished and all lands were under government control. Due to this Great Leap Forward, collectivization, and many other policies, Mao wanted to grow China's economy. But because of improper implementation of his policies and communist ideology, it all went against the plan and proved a failure. In 1962, Mao Zedong was quietly pushed to the sidelines and his rivals took control of the country. For the first time in 25 years, Mao was not a central figure in leadership. Deng Xiaoping became the new president of the country with the central leadership of the party, and Liu Shaoqi was the second most powerful position. But he started a cultural revolution, which was his greatest tactic. Mao reorganized the party and again became the prominent leader of the party. With this, Liu and Deng Xiaoping were downgraded. You can guess from this quote which type of person is Mao Zedong. All political power comes from the barrel of the gun. The Cultural Revolution ended with Chairman Mao Zedong's death on September 9, 1976. In December 1978, Deng Xiaoping emerged as China's superior leader. Deng started a complete program to reform the retrograde Chinese economy. Within several years, a full-on drive replaced the country's focus on ideological purity to acquire material wealth. The reforms aspired to decrease the role of the state in the economy and slowly raised private forms of production in agriculture and industry. Deng Xiaoping is known as the founding father of modern China, because Deng had invested heavily in science and technology as soon as he came to power. Simultaneously, the economy was liberalized, due to which foreign investment started growing rapidly. While the public was generally well-received reforms, Deng's political model gave excessive power to elite party bureaucrats, so thus it allows nepotism and corruption to grow rapidly. In addition, the change in the economy and government system came very rapidly. Inflation skyrocketed, lending to panic among salaried workers that they could no longer afford needly foods. Moreover, in the new market and economy, zero profitable state-owned companies were pressured to cut costs. And the new problem named crisis came in China. Despite the opening of new colleges and increased recruitment, the government-directed education system did not make enough graduates to meet increased market demands in the areas of agriculture, light industry service, and foreign investments. In addition, private companies are no longer required to accept students assigned to them by the state, and many high-paying jobs were offered on a nepotism and favoritism basis. Facing a depressing job market and limited opportunities for intellectuals and students to go abroad. Consequently, the protesters started extreme protest and ended with massacre. In mid-1986, astrophysics professor Fang Liqi, who had returned from a position at Princeton University, New Jersey, USA, he began a personal tour of universities in China. He started to influence the students and speak about human rights and the separation of political powers. Similarly, many other scientists, professors, and other intellectuals like Fang also joined this movement, and they started inspiring the students to protest against the communist government. Yao Bang was the only senior leader in the Chinese government who was supporting this protest. Meanwhile, on April 15, 1989, the General Secretary of the Chinese government, Hu Yaobang, died, which intensified the protests. The sudden death of Yaobang increased the outrage among the students. From that day onwards, through large posters, people were being made aware of press freedom, democracy, and corruption. As a result, a large number of students from nearby universities started joining the Tiananmen Square protest. As its size grew, the group slowly evolved into a protest as students began to prepare a list of 7 demands. And these 7 demands are: first, confirm Hu Yaobang's views on democracy and independence as correct. Second, admit that the movements against spiritual pollution and bourgeois liberalization had been wrong. Third, publish information on the income of state leaders and their family members. Fourth, allow privately operated newspapers and stop press censorship. Fifth, increase funding for education and raise intellectuals' pay. Sixth, end limitations on marches in Beijing. And seventh, provide objective coverage of students in authorized media. To officially talk to the Chinese government, the students formed a student union named Autonomous Federation on April 23rd. On 26 April, the party's official newspaper, People's Daily, published a provocative editorial, in which the students' protest was termed as anti-party and anti-government. After this, about 1 lakh students from all the universities of Beijing started marching in the streets of Beijing. On May 13th, 2 days before the visit of Russian Premier Mikhail Gorbachev to China, students started a hunger strike. State media was broadcasting this entire protest and hunger strike. Due to this, students started getting sympathy from all over the country. And about 1 million Beijing residents also joined this protest. After this, the Chinese government became furious. On May 20th, the army was deployed in the whole of Beijing and declared martial law. On the evening of June 3rd, the Chinese government through state-owned TV warned residents of Beijing to stay indoors. But people ignored it, and a crowd of people took to the streets. The units of the Chinese army were stationed all around Beijing and started firing at people at 10 p.m. At 10:16 p.m., the government warned through loudspeakers that soldiers might take any measures to execute martial law. At 10:30 p.m., news of bloodshed to the west and south of the city started leaking into the square. At almost 12:15 a.m., a flare ignited up the sky, and the first armored personnel vehicle looked on the square from the west. At 12:30 a.m., 2 more armed personal carriers arrived from the south. The students threw pieces of stones at the vehicles. At 2 a.m., the troops fired shots over the students' heads at the monument. The students broadcast pleadings toward the troops. "We appeal to you in peace, for democracy and liberty of the motherland, for strength and prosperity of the Chinese nation. Please comply with the will of the people and refrain from using force against peaceful student demonstrators." The first row of soldiers was armed with machine guns from the face-down position. Behind them, soldiers squatted and stood with assault rifles. Combined among them were anti-riot police with clubs. Further back were tanks and APCs. At 4:30 in the morning, the lights of the square were suddenly switched off, and thousands of unarmed and innocent students were gunned down and crushed by tanks. And when protesters started coming to Tiananmen Square from other streets of Beijing, troops were also mercilessly fired upon. The night before, Tiananmen Square, filled with about 1 million protesters, was completely empty till the morning. But on 4 June, firing continued in many places. On 5 June, the suppression of the protest was immortalized outside of China via video footage and pictures of a lone person standing in front of a row of tanks leaving Tiananmen Square via Chang'an Avenue. The Tank Man became one of the most iconic photographs of the 20th century. As the tank driver tried to go around him, the Tank Man moved into the tank's path. He continued to stand defiantly in front of the tanks for some time, then climbed up onto the turret of the lead tank to speak to the soldiers inside. After returning to his position in front of the tanks, a group of people was pulled aside the man. According to the Chinese government, 300 casualties and 5,000 injuries from protests were held in this disaster, but many reports claim that more than 10,000 civilians died in this massacre. China's Communist Party has worked hard to erase the June 4, 1989 incident, Tiananmen Square, from history in mainland China. Pillar of Shame is an 8-meter tall sculpture established at Hong Kong University. It represented the Tiananmen Square massacre of 1989, but after China take over the Hong Kong, it was broken into pieces and removed. Its removal is a treatment of the ruling Communist Party's effort to erase the blood-stained events of that day from the Chinese public mind. The government doesn't allow any memorial and even whisk dissidents out of town, so they can't organize any commemoration around the anniversary. There is no mention of it in the media, and this memorable day also passes like any other. To suppress this tragedy, the Chinese government banned social media to post content related to this. As we know, China is a propaganda king of the world, to manipulate the Chinese public through social media, newspapers, and the education system. After about 36 years, in the Chinese education system there is zero coverage of this so big Tiananmen Square massacre. So you can say that this is what actual dictatorship looks like. We have already exposed the propaganda of the Communist Party of China in our Uyghurs video. If you haven't seen this yet, then you must watch it and share it as much as you can so that everyone will see the real face of the China's CCP. This is it for today's episode. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more content.